Parents who know that their child is afraid of the unknown, which they are. Suppose a father was to take his young son into an amusement park where they have the tunnel of horrors. You know what that is. So he takes the little boy into the little ride through the tunnel of horrors and the little carts that jerk fast and with a little noise around corners. And shut it off a minute. So the father takes his young son to this tunnel of horrors. They get together in the seat, and the machine, little cart, starts off. And around the first corner, a skeleton all lighted up with horrible eyes jumps in front of them. And the little child gasps and cuddles close to his father, terrified. His father isn't terrified. So it goes around the next corner, and a big monster with big gnashing teeth jumps out at them with strange eyes. Child gasps in fear again and gets even closer to his father. This goes on and on and on till the end of the ride, where about 10 different horrors, fears, apparitions were presented to the child, and he's totally afraid, lost in his own horror, which is in him. Father understands that, so he says, "Okay, son, we're going again." So he pays the money again. They get in the ride again. Same thing happens again. You're ahead of me already, aren't you? "Okay, son, we're going a third time, fourth time, fifth time." And of course the father knows is that each time they go through, the child is not quite as frightened as he was before. Not quite the tensing up when the skeleton jumps out. And at the end of the ride, after the 10th time through, the child is so unafraid that he's looking for something else to do. He's no longer amused by his own fear. That's something the father understands. But he goes further than that. He arranges to have the operator of the tunnel of horror to let the father and the son come down during the daylight hours when the thing isn't running. And he takes his son on a tour behind the scenes of the fearful apparitions. And he says, "Now look, son, see the skeleton over there? Over there way back, and with all the equipment that's piled up around there, just standing motionless in the corner. He doesn't seem frightening now, doesn't he?" The son looks at him, he says, "No." And he says, "Notice the chain tied to him, how that chain is tied to a little force that when we reach a certain point, it activates the chain, and the chain brings the skeleton out. And the skeleton shakes and scares other people." Then he goes to the next monster, and he shows them that every one of those terrors is simply a mechanical force that comes out because something activates it. And because the mind then says that is fearful, it reacts to what it thinks it sees there. So the knowledge of simply the mechanical parts of the horror people, mechanical parts become quite clear to the child. And in that clear knowledge and understanding that it is simply something mechanical, something that has no life in itself, does it? No life in itself. The very understanding of that finishes off for the child to the degree that he can understand it. So that if he was to go on the ride again, he wouldn't react the way he did before. He would have to do a lot of that, and I condensed the whole story, and you connect it now with what we're going to talk about this morning. And I have a sentence that I'm going to give you in a minute. You know, I say this occasionally, I know, but I want to tell you, I'm glad for you, and you should be glad for you, that you didn't miss this morning's meeting. Because the sentence I'm going to give to you in a minute if you will connect it with the little introduction I just gave, everything could change. Begin to change for you real fast. Begin to see the mistake you've been making about being afraid, about trembling. How many of you are afraid? Everyone raise your hand. Something happens out there. The boss yells at you. The husband is getting less interested in you than he was before. You understand that is the skeleton that leaps out in front of you, and you put fear into it. It doesn't put fear into you, not really. You put fear into that because the fear is first in you, and you extend it out there, and you tremble and shake and look for help always in the wrong places. We have so many false sources of wisdom and strength. Listen to what I'm going to give you. By the way, I rewrote this several times just to get it perfect as words can do to make something clear. Let me read it to you first, please. Give me your attention to read it first, and then write it down, and it'll be available later on if you want it. And you're welcome to gasp at the depth of it, and you will if you see it. If you don't, you'll think it's just another sentence that you're given every once in a while in class. Since I am already in fear, I have nothing more to fear by exploring fear. Since I am already in fear, I have nothing more to fear by exploring fear. You see, when the child went into the ride, the horrible ride, he had an inner psychic system that was afraid. And anything can activate it, cause him to shake, to huddle close to his father. Anything can do that. So he was in a state where he was afraid inwardly, and all it took was the pushing of a button to make him afraid from the challenge that comes out there. I am already in a state of fear. Now you tell me, and you tell yourself, what possibly you can lose by exploring the fear that you were already in. Look at the blunder we've made. By saying, for example, I will be afraid if I lose this or that. Now, I like to get specific. It helps so much. I will be afraid if I lose my present youthfulness and grow old. I will be afraid if I lose this person who is valuable to me. I will be afraid if I lose my present little so-called securities, financially, socially, the security of my combined daydreams. I will be afraid if something or someone takes those away. Now you see the mistake, don't you? The person is thinking in time, I will be afraid. Liberty from all fear comes by changing that to saying, I am afraid. Now. So what's this foolish business of reacting to the skeletons of tomorrow? What's this illogic, this irrational thinking of saying, I will be afraid when I grow older? How many are afraid of growing older? Yeah. You know you're going to grow older physically. What's this business of saying, I will be afraid? Now, if I make the very intelligent observation of saying, I am afraid right now, I have already canceled time thinking, haven't I? And I can then say, well, what do you know? My very nature at the present moment is fear. That is what is there. By doing this, I have canceled out all falsely self-protecting ideas and see the fear directly, no wall of thought, no thought that says, well, I may grow old, but I saw a book down at the library that says, be graceful at 80. If I cancel all such thoughts as that which are protective, which are trying to make me feel better, if I cancel all that, I am now looking at what is there truly intelligently, truly directly, and I can then understand by watching the thought, exploring in back of the monster, seeing the chains, I can then see that the fear I am watching is nothing but yet a mechanical force that I am permitting to come into my mind, because it in itself, the fear in itself gives me amusement. Did you ever consider that we like to be afraid? I'll give you a clue, as if you didn't have it already. If you're going to watch a movie on television tonight, a scary movie, are you not enjoying being amused by the fear, knowing, of course, that you're safe in your little living room there? But there's a certain pleasure, a certain excitement, a certain false feeling of life of putting yourself into that movie scene and getting the thrill, getting the amusement of being afraid. Now that's a relatively minor one. Why do you cling to the false amusement of being afraid of losing anything? Why are you afraid of being attacked by anything or anyone? Why do you get pleasure in fearing to grow old? Why is that your level? It's your level because it's the only level you know, and we're here to understand that having the courage to abandon that level where only fear can dominate, just exploring it, looking at the mechanicalness of it, for example, beginning to see that only I have something to fear, and if I get rid of the I, where's the fear? I've understood by a very deep and thorough exploration the move I have made, the right move I've made. I've understood that exploration leads to understanding, to insight. And with that insight and with the absence of me, there can be no fear. Now watch how you're going to react to this question. We've done this before. I'll do it again. Would you like to have this state in which you are not afraid of anything? Would you welcome that? No, you won't welcome it at all, because you can't conceive a state in which there is no amusement from being afraid. As one fear goes accidentally out of your life, that mean husband goes away, that scary situation vanishes. Your very nature, as it's now constituted, will very, very desperately find a substitute, because you're afraid to be without your fear. This just gives you something to do with yourself. This gives you something to talk about. This gives you something to feel inwardly. This gives you something to complain about. This gives you something to pretend that you're now seeking salvation from your fear. And so you go to the psychiatrist or psychologist, or you go to the clergyman, or you go to church, and now you can say to yourself, look how active I am in seeking a better life, and you're lying, lying, lying. I'm going to give you some more sentences. Did you get that one? I'll repeat it once more. Since I am already in fear, I have nothing more to fear by exploring fear. It takes courage to explore fear because there's a part of you that senses will be the ending of all this false activity you have in fighting fear. You want to fight fear. And the very cringing away from it is a very peculiar form of fighting it. I am afraid of this monster, therefore I can do something about getting rid of it. The self-deception in that is so enormous. Anything you fight, you create. Anything you fight, you create. Does this sound like a familiar statement that you're making to yourself, what I'm going to give you now? Does this sound familiar to you and to your friends? Everyone shrieks in terror, I can't win and I'm afraid to lose. Everyone shrieks in terror, I can't win and I'm afraid to lose. How's that for a contradiction? You think about that. Sentence. Listen to it first, please. The wrath of truth is not what you think it is, so you must approach truth to let it teach you that the wrath you fear is really your own unnecessary wrathful thoughts. The wrath of truth is not what you think it is, so you must approach truth to let it teach you that the wrath you fear is really your own unnecessary wrathful thoughts. You don't really fear truth. None of you really fear me. I know some of you think you do. You don't fear me. You fear the extinguishing of your own wrath at the hands of truth and perhaps at the hands of me as I teach you these things. There's no way you can fear who I really am, for example, but the false parts in you fear the right parts that I may have in myself. So you think the wrath is going to come at you from the utterances of truth when it's already in you. You project. You think that the truth can do something horrible to you when you don't understand, because you haven't explored the mechanical parts of yourself, that the wrath by which you live and which is unconscious to you is already there, and already the force that is hurting you, and already the force that lies to you and says, if you approach truth, something bad will happen to you. You will get jumped on, for example. You will get hurt. Where's the wrath? Where's the fear? Where's the agony? Right in you. Again, this has a connection, a little further gap between what we're talking about and what I'm going to read now. But do see how every piece in the jigsaw puzzle connects with another piece in one way or another to make the whole picture, even though one piece is not immediately next to the next piece. This is a little longer, so listen to this, please, first. The self-rejectors call themselves modest, but they are dangerously conceited. The self-acceptors call themselves confident, but they are foolishly weak. Only the absence of self-thought is truly modest and confident. However, the absence of self-thought comes only after the individual has unmasked hundreds of self-thoughts masquerading as the absence of self-thoughts. Once more, slowly, so we can absorb. The self-rejectors call themselves modest, but they are dangerously conceited. The self-acceptors call themselves confident, but they are foolishly weak. Only in the absence of self-thought is truly modest and confident. However, the absence of self-thought comes only after the individual has unmasked hundreds of self-thoughts, masquerading as the absence of self-thoughts. Remember the other day we spoke about lost people must always reject the present. The present is their enemy. Do you remember that? Lost people must always reject themselves in an attempt to convince themselves that there's a self to reject. How's that for a triple delusion? If you reject yourself, what are you rejecting? You're rejecting the illusion that there's a self there to reject. But it's a very good trick, a very cunning trick for all of us to play in order to keep the self-thoughts going and keep the delusion going, the agony going, that there's someone there to reject. The self-acceptors are simply the other side of the self-rejectors. Do you know people who are phonily confident? Do you know yourself might have a lot of phony confidence trying to convince yourself that you know what you're doing? Isn't all this centered around a so-called self? And if you accept yourself as being a brilliant, competent person or a sincere person, notice how difficult it is to keep the game going, how the next minute you're in despair. Oh boy, I'll tell you, despair has great value in keeping the tricky game going, doesn't it? How many of you have been in despair? See, I have to wake you up. I don't know whether you're alive out there or not. Been in despair today, the rest all your life. Let's settle that and get it out of the way. Your very despair becomes a very valuable trick, stunt, to keep the illusion going that you have a life of your own. I am in despair. You always say, I am in despair because. Then the lie starts. If you stopped, I am in despair, period, that would be an honest statement and a looking at the present conditioning, looking at your present nature as it actually operates. But when you say, I am in despair, I am afraid because, you add the lie and try to project it to something outside of yourself so that you can carry on the delusion of duality, that is, that there is a you there who is scared of the future, of growing old, of growing poor, of growing unliked, of not having anyone to back up your false opinions, back up your false lie. So it is quite necessary for a person in despair to do everything possible to keep himself in that miserable state. So ununderstandable are all these things we've talked about for about 25 minutes now. So ununderstandable are they that few human beings ever break through. And I want you to understand that quite thoroughly. And then I want you to turn your attention to the fact that it might be you who refuses to understand these things because you have false fear. You have a false fear of being no one. You have a false fear of wondering what you will be like if you don't have your despair. One way to find out is to get in that little tram car that goes through the tunnel of horrors, and at the same time that the monster with the gnashing teeth and the strange looking eyes, at the same moment that he leaps out and shakes his fists in front of you, at the same time he does that, you are doing something independent of that, which is you're sitting back as best you can at the start, of course. You're sitting back and watching yourself shake at the same time you're shaking. This is the beginning of understanding that the fear is something, a mechanical force out there. It's out there, of course it is. It's out there, but this mechanical monster out there activates the mechanical monster that is in you. Both being on the same level, you then vibrate to what you have seen out there. But you go through the ride consciously as you can, 10 times, 50 times. And that's one part of it. You get acquainted with it by watching how you react to it each time you do indeed react to it. Then after that, you go a little further and you ask the owner of the Tunnel of Horrors ride if you could come back in the daylight, consciousness of course, come back in the daylight and examine the process. And there you go in back, and there's workmen standing around repairing the skeleton, fixing the monster up to make him look more horrible. In the daylight, isn't everything completely different? There's no fear there. Why isn't there any fear there? Because you understand. Understand with a capital U. The word understanding must begin to mean far more to you than it presently does. You must begin to see that understanding with a capital U is your salvation, your only deliverance from all the monsters that are now invading your life and living inside of you. Then you get on the horror ride. Here's the horror ride. You can nod your head to this. When you get up in the morning, the horror ride begins. All right. Presently, when you go down to where you work, or you make these encounters with people, or you just look over and see your husband's face there, that's the beginning of the horror ride in the morning. And up until this time, looking at that person's face or encountering that dreadful letter that came in the mail or that phone call or that news item, up till now, because the monsters are still very alive in you, the monsters out there can then activate them and you shake, correct? All right. This is the way it has been up until the present time in our life. But with this exploration of everything, you will still get up in the morning. You may still look at your husband's horrible face. You may still get that same kind of mail, phone calls, bad news, whatever it might be. You will still get that. But there's no one there to be afraid of it. There's no monster in you to be set off by the monster out there, which means that the monster out there has already disappeared, too. Do you understand? Look, you get the letter with bad news. Your taxes have gone up. Your friend no longer is your friend. Your lover has disappeared. And you look at it, and you take it as a fact. But how is that fact going to terrify you when there's no one there to be terrified by it? There is no wrong relationship between what happened out there and your reaction. There's nothing in you that can react wrongly to it. When you take anything as a pure fact without self-reference, how can you shake? But you don't understand this yet. And the you who is presently in charge of your life has no way of understanding it. It will seek answers. It will cuddle close to Papa. It will try to relieve the agony of it, the tension of it. But nothing works, simply because we've done the wrong thing. We haven't explored to the point where we see that there, in reality, in truth, in God, in the kingdom of heaven, I don't have to react to the fact the way I used to. It's a start. As a student, when you get that letter, you'll say, oh, I remember what they said in class, and so I'll say it. And so you say mechanically, what has that to do with me? All right. But when you come to the end of the sentence, shaky. All right. We know that. We accept that as a stage. And after doing that, can you take it this morning? After doing that I'll be modest this morning. After doing that for 2,000 times, this is the 2,000th trip through the Tunnel of Horrors. After doing that 2,000 times, what will happen is that you will understand with a capital U that you have been saying it mechanically in an attempt to convince yourself. I tell you, that's fine, that's marvelous. You've got the words, you've got the idea, you've got the principle of the thing. But if you remain dissatisfied with mouthing it, with parroting it, and if you remain alert to see that you're still scared, then the real change will occur inside of you. So that the time will come when you open the letter and you read it, and you don't say it mechanically because you're far above that. You will look at it, and there is no kind of reaction at all except the reaction of understanding. You look at it, and you put the letter down. That's the end of it. You don't pick it up. You ever get a goodbye letter? Huh? Come on, girls, men. And you look at it, you hope, you read it, maybe he doesn't mean that. Or maybe if you don't like him, you hope he does mean that. There's no continued connection with the mechanical text of the letter. You toss it aside, and that's the end of it. That's a stage. Conclusion. I'll read the conclusion. Since I am already in fear, I have nothing more to fear by exploring fear. Time for a break. Your life is much too valuable for you to protect it. Your life is much too valuable for you to continue to protect it, defend it fiercely the way you have been. All your defenses of your present false life are unseen, are unconscious. Only by being jolted here and taking the jolts correctly can you understand what I just said. Only by taking the jolts from daily life out there rightly, that is, with a wish to understand instead of resist, can you begin to see what it means to be falsely careful with your life. How strange that we protect the trash, that we protect the haunted house, calling it valuable. After all it has done against us. This is why I've urged you, and you have to understand from a higher viewpoint what it means. I've urged you to go as fast as you can and as recklessly as you can. By beginning to understand from a higher viewpoint what it means to be reckless with your life, you will get your first glimpses of what you have been doing against yourself, thinking that it's something for yourself, how you've been protecting your precious but false ideas, how you've been clinging to the familiar feelings developed out of past experiences, how you protect those as being you, as being precious, as being something necessary, as being something good. It is only by being reckless, by defying the familiar, by defying it and say, I'm going to find out how I will feel if I don't go along with that self-protection. Just for the exploration of it. I'm going to find out what new state, if there is such a thing, and you don't know it yet, so don't take the word new as being new. I'm going to find out what is on the other side of my familiar self-protective reactions. My irritation, for example. I get irritated, you get irritated 50 times a day and don't notice one of them. So I'm going to begin to notice my irritations and note how curious that my irritation is a false form of protection of my present sick, miserable, neurotic little life. My irritation is obviously a preservation of it, because irritation is a burn, isn't it? What else? You tell me what it is. When I am irritated, I'm divided, I feel bad. Irritation makes me feel bad. I'm not happy when I'm irritated. And there's no way I can call irritation happiness, crabbiness. No way I can call crabbiness happiness. And I sense that it's not happiness, but it's all I've got. Now maybe can come into play your preliminary understanding of what I just said about beginning to be reckless with the familiar, not believe in it, not go along with it, not accept it, not be afraid of it, but to simply defy it. Right defiance of the familiar is what we're talking about when we're talking about being reckless. You're not risking anything. Not really. What you are is risking the end of your crabbiness, of your unhappiness, of your fear. Don't you want to risk that? No. Not if that is your present life. Everything that is presently familiar and valuable to you psychologically will have to be given up. You'll have to simply say goodbye to it, walk away from it. Walk away scared, of course, but do it. Do it. Find 10 different ways every day to begin to defy the old nature that lies to you every day. It lies to us, and we're consenting to the lie. We will withdraw our consent to being lied to by our own nature. Then the lies that come from the outside will no longer be believed in, will no longer be able to frighten us. The ghosts and the skeletons that leap out of us won't have any meaning to us at all, because we understand their nature. We understand their nature by not being their nature any longer, but by being something else that we don't presently understand. But you have never been told to understand something until you can understand it. How can you? You're asked to walk toward understanding. That's all that's required of any of us. If you're in the jungle, you're in the jungle, period. You're asked to have the courage to see that it is a jungle and to start walking out of it instead of saying the jungle is the beautiful rose-colored meadow. That's what we're asked to do, to stop lying about our present condition. Beginning to not lie about it is the first step out of it. And the first step out of the jungle, and therefore into understanding with a capital U. Give up trying to rescue yourself from irritation. Give up trying to rescue yourself from irritation. If you try to rescue yourself, you keep it going. Because the part of you that's trying to rescue yourself is on the same level as the irritation itself. If you cease to try to rescue yourself, that would be putting an end to thought. And since the irritation is on the level of thought, you put an end to yourself, the rescuer, and the irritation itself, because they're all one thing. Now, you have enough to think about for a year. Go ahead, Ernesto.
I think what he's asking is if you will go more deeply into the thoughts we have in our mind, which are telling us they're not really thoughts. They're masquerading as non-thoughts, as you said.
Oh, all right. Well, let's make it clear at the start. There is such a thing as thoughts. That's clear. We think all the time. What we're trying to see is that thoughts have only a purpose in everyday living, in acquiring truth, a truthful idea, a truthful thought. The mistake you make on the intellectual level, on the level of thoughts, is saying I. Thoughts always say I. They have no choice but to do anything but say I. Now, because your real nature is not a thought I, that is, you're not the great military hero. You're not the flop in life who can't make any money like all your friends did. All these self-thoughts are mere ideas about Ernesto or Tom or whoever. They're all thoughts about, but you don't know that they're thoughts about because you haven't got to the point where you can stand outside and see thoughts actually calling themselves by your name, either as a success or a flop, or as a courageous person or as a cowardly person. That connects with something I read earlier. If you say, I accept myself, you're trying to convince yourself that there's someone there who is real, someone to accept. You don't even know what you're talking about, but you read it in a positive thinking book or something, and it sounds great. But if you have that, then you'll still have to reject yourself, because that's the opposite thought, and all thoughts have an opposite. Someday I'm working real hard. Working real hard to find at least 10,000 ways to say to you what I have just said to you. 10,000 different examples, 10,000 repetitions, a substitute of this word for that word. And maybe someday, after the 10,000th time, you will say, I see. And that saying will be very silent and very, very clear.
The mentally created I cannot think itself outside of thought.
Correct.
But it thinks it can.
Correct. Because it wants to think it can, because a part of the thought process is imagination, is vanity, is a fear of anything unlike itself. Thought fears anything unlike itself. Thought wants to live in its cozy little family of delusion. 1,000 little deluded thoughts love to come together and pretend that they form a real I. We can catch them a little at a time, and this is why I brought up irritation, which is such a prevalent and common thing in our daily life. If I can begin to catch just one of these little thoughts that claim to make up me, my irritation, if I can catch that, and if I can see what it does against me, how I don't have real life, that I'm lying to myself, if I can begin to understand that I'm lying to myself by calling irritation a good thing, an exciting thing, if I can simply see it as a distraction from real life, if I can stop lying about the therapeutic value of irritation and see, instead of healing me, it is killing me, that insight alone is enough for me to see through the one thought, the false thought, the irritation has value, and the understanding of that weakens its force. This is God operating, not me. Me, on the level of thought, wants to believe in the power of irritation to give me something to do, to make me feel excited. Crabbiness retorts to you, well, I hate you too. The very understanding of the false process permits God, who is understanding with a capital U, to put an end to it.
This tape will be continued now on side 2.
I have no idea what that would mean.
You don't know the conceit is dangerous to Rudy or to Nancy or to
Maybe
Richard?
it's dancing, but
Huh?
I only sense what it's doing, but I cannot see it.
Well, what is conceit but a false idea that I have value on the level of thinking about myself? I am lying when I say I have value, and that is a conceit thought. Now, what is the opposite of a conceit thought? A despair thought. Look, come on. Aren't human faces really, honestly now, if you can read them even a little bit, the giveaway? My face, your face. Let's study our facial expressions so that when I say to you, I am strong and I'm confident, I understand the answers to life, and I went to church and theological seminary, and I understand God and eternity. I understand that. Can't I turn my attention back on my own face while I'm saying that? And if you do it thoroughly, you'll be able to see the strain in your facial expression as you're seeing that, which means you're beginning to see the contradiction. In short, seeing what an incredible liar you or I am. I'm telling you how marvelous things are in my life. Well, they weren't so good 5 years ago, but things have changed. I moved to this other state, and I have new friends, and I have this new activity, and I'm really... Why am I telling you about that? Huh? Why am I forcing an excited expression on my face when I'm telling you that? Am I not a very, very pathetic human being? All right. You may see that in me. That does me no good at all. I have to see it in me and see it at the very moment it's going on. I have to see that strain. Come on. Is there any strain in effortless confidence? Then if there is strain in my face and everywhere else while I'm talking about my confident, happy, triumphant life, what's that strain telling me? It's telling me the truth, isn't it? It's telling me the facts about my actual condition. Can I please stop lying about it and have the honesty and the decency and the courage to begin to do something real for myself by seeing, while I'm telling you all these marvelous, exciting things, that I'm nothing more than a big, big liar. The courage to face contradictions, right? That's what we need. And I carry that further. Why wait for courage? Why not just do it? Do it without courage. It can be done without courage, because we don't have any anyway. But we can do it in fear and trembling. I accept that challenge. That's how I grow. Do you know how I grow? I'll tell you my secret of what growth I have. Coming here day after day after day and looking at the same dull, scared little faces and saying, you may give up with you, but I'm not. You had your hand up. You create an image of an enemy. The image is caused by your own mind. Now you tell me, if you are afraid of another person, if you're afraid of another person, point one, where is the fear? Are you experienced? Are you feeling it? Are you feeling the fear?
Yeah.
Then where is it? But you project it out to the other person in order to create the idea that you are separate from that other person, and you're not. You're both on the same level of fear, by the way. But now you can, among 1,000 other things, you can say, I am not responsible for the fear I am feeling. You are responsible because you speak so sternly, or you have governmental or social authority. You can make me feel afraid. The part that's valuable to me is the fact that I can say, I am afraid. You're not afraid at all. There is a fear going through you which you have latched onto in order to be an independent entity so that you can exist apart from the capital W-H-O-L-E. That's a delusion. You don't exist apart from it. But part of the tricks we play is to create as many fears as we can, really a whole lot of them, because we're always very careful that if we run out of one fear, we want another to back it up, to fall back on, see? I is utterly selfish. It doesn't want any eyes beside itself. And you know, this is too much for you, but I'll say it, and maybe you'll grasp a little bit. The I can never recognize the existence of anything outside of itself because it has made a world unto itself, and no other world has a right to exist. And even its so-called kindness and cooperation is a very, very subtle means of trying to affirm its own world. You don't know how bad it is. You don't know how sick everybody is. You don't know how sick you are. See, you won't face the present sickness of yourself, of the entire world, and that's a mistake you're presently making, which you have to correct. You think the world is just a little bit sick, or you're just a little bit sick. What could turn you into a raging devil? Huh? Each one of you, ask yourself, what could turn you into a raging devil? You don't really know because you haven't ever faced it. Try to examine and see what could set you off. You'll have to dig pretty deep.
In the fact of everyday life, I'm going to offend some people just by being me. Some
All right.
are going to like me and some are not.
All right.
If I could authentically understand what it meant to like my real self, it would make no difference to me whether they frowned at me or smiled at me from the outside.
Oh, he said, if I understand what it means to like my real self. Please don't talk about the real self. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't like your real self. You can only be your real self. If you like what you call your real self, it is a false self. There is you liking something, and that is division. When you're your real self, you don't think about it, therefore you don't create a division, therefore what you really are is real, and no comment is necessary. And with that, good morning.
Morning.
When every other person in the room has let their head fall to the side in sleep, and they go into an artificial, automatic, non-real state. Don't you know that if everyone else on earth is asleep, which practically everyone is, that you don't have to be influenced by that, that you don't have to fall under that? Haven't you noticed how you look around at the crowd, whether this crowd or some other crowd, or the crowd on television, or out in the market, or wherever? Haven't you noticed how you look around and try to find out what's the prevailing attitude, viewpoint, conviction, in quote marks, of the moment? And because you're all such miserable little cowards, no life of your own at all, and you don't even know you have no life of your own, you fall right along with the majority attitude, expression, whatever it might be. Now, why do you do that? Well, first place, you don't know you're doing. You do that because the coward in every human being has one major objective in life. And that major objective, which is killing him and her, is to be safe. You see, even if 51 people are opposed to 49 people, then those 51 people can like you more than 49 people. They can vote for you more than 49 people. Those 59 people represent a majority that's be on your side. Of course, if it's 90 to 10, that's much better. And maybe I better tell you what happens if it ever becomes 99 to 1. You, yes you, seated here tonight and listening to this tape, you will turn into a snarling beast and join that 99 against that one person who maybe would go against the others in any way at all that's real. Can you see that truly you have no life of your own, but whatever is the majority opinion or the single opinion of that husband that you value more than truth, or your wife or your children or your family or your friends? Can't you see that you go along with that and you don't know what you are doing to yourself and to them? Not that they want your righteousness, but you have to begin to build your own righteousness to see that it's quite possible, right in the middle of you being one person in 3 billion people here on earth, that if you want it enough, then you can look out and see them laugh at the dirty joke, and you don't laugh. You can see them telling lies, and you don't tell lies. You can see them pretending to be decent, and you don't join the pretense. And you know, nicely, it's the easiest thing you will ever have done in your life. You can't see that now, that it's easy to be strong, because now you're finding it very difficult to be strong. In the first place, you don't know what it is, and secondly, you're trying to be strong according to your present condition and false definitions of what it means to be strong as the world lives. Their idea of being strong, which is a horrible thing, is to be on the side of the majority. 51% enough. You'd rather have it 100%, but you can't get that, so you settle for what you can get. So you find it very difficult to stand alone, don't you? You find it hard to even know what it means to stand alone, to take the right side. And of course you don't know what the right side is. You have never known. All you've known is the side that promised you the most rewards, or the side that promised you the most punishments. And so you took your little slate, blackboard slate, and drew a line down the middle and figured out which side is the best for you to be on. The very fact that you're thinking, which side should I take, means you have no central authority from yourself, from your own mind, from your own spirit, but are still trying to protect something that isn't worth protecting, namely, your life as you're presently leading it. And you sense that yourself. You sense that the life you're presently leading is not worth living because it's so miserable, because you have to figure out whether to turn left and right, and you guess wrong at least half the time, more than that. And even when you guess right, it turns out wrong. The thrill goes away and you're right back where you started. We're truly all on the merry-go-round, coming right back to where we started each time. Now, what about a life in which I'm living it from who I really am, from who you really are? Where's the effort involved in that? The thing is done. Remember we talked a good deal about eternity, that it never began and that never ended, which the intellect can't understand because it thinks in the opposites of the beginning of time and the ending of time, correct? The beginning of your life and the ending of your life. The beginning of the day, the ending of the day. The beginning of the household task, the ending of the household tasks. Therefore, the intellect, as it presently operates within most people, can't understand such a thing as an eternity without beginning or without end. But if you're actually living in this timeless state, what's there to do? Well, what's there to do is to be wide awake when Leland walks into the room. Be wide awake when that crisis comes up tomorrow, that bill you have to pay, which you caused by your own bungling probably in some way or other. Your financial problems, by the way, are your own inner problems that started there. So you take all these daily problems and set them out before you, and in your present way of thinking, they drive you crazy. And new ones come along. The old ones go away and new ones come along. This is what almost all the 4 billion human beings on earth call living. Living an exciting life, a life where I'm going somewhere, where I'm going to get something, where there's struggles. Such a human being is lost and doesn't know it. We're talking about something that is so utterly different that if you try to figure it out using your imagination, using your memory, using all the yardsticks by which you usually measure things, you'll always go wrong. This means, where we always come back to, a long, long leap into I don't know where. I don't know how to solve that problem. I never have solved it. Every time I solve it, it comes back in another form. I get rid of that man and another nutty man comes along. I get rid of that shrewish woman and another horrible woman comes along. I think I've got my parents to the point where they're not going to nag me. Here I am 30 years old. My parents still nag me. And I think I've explained to them. And then I get the letter or the phone call. There's no end to it. Of course there isn't. The reason there's no end to your problems is because you're a problem factory. You are a problem factory and you don't see it. You don't want to see it. It's the last thing you want to see. For one thing, if you were to begin to see that you're living out of time, or rather in time and out of eternity, if you were to see this, it would do something that just makes you cry so badly, makes you feel so bad, which is that you're going to have to begin to take not only a responsibility for your life, for what happens, for the problems that come to you. You're not only going to have to take responsibility for it, but you're going to have to understand what it means to take a new kind of responsibility. And let me tell you what that involves. It involves seeing that you can't do anything for yourself except to give up the illusion that you can do something for yourself, except see through your own fantasies. There it is. There it is. Is there any need for a further talk from me? I've told you what to do. Now you want explanations, don't you? You want more details on that, don't you? You won't look and listen at what I just said because you don't want to work. You want to sit back there in the chair and listen to a talk. And during the question and answer period, you want to ask questions. Well, you said that I have to take a new kind of responsibility for myself. What does that mean? When are you going to even begin to think about, just the lowest level at all, to begin to think about solving your own problems by finding out for yourself what it means to take a new kind of responsibility, which I've already explained, and if you pursued it, you would see it. It means giving up thinking that you have to do anything for yourself because there's no one there to do anything for. Now, isn't that nice? Or is it terrifying? Or is it so darkly hidden from you that you would rather pretend that you can't grasp it? That's good. That's a good out. That's a nice lie. Just pretend. I've got to ask questions. I've got to read books. I need someone to go into more detail. That's a pretty good alibi for not doing what you must do. Remember, one time I told you a key word, which is the word exploration. Exploration. What more do you want than that? Don't you dare sit there and try to make me think that you have sincerity in you when you refuse to explore the comments, the talks, the ideas, the principles, the truth that you've been given here for 2 or 3 years. You want to come here and let someone do the work for you. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in the East Coast, where it was cold and big cities back there, and he got tired of living in a crowded big city. So this was 100 years ago. So he decided to move out west. So he was all alone. So to escape the big, noisy cities, which already were pretty grim, he moved out and came out west. And he found a nice little place to settle down in. He had a little cabin that he lived in. But being primitive and no civilization yet, for which he was very grateful, he had to go down to the river to get the water that he needed every day. And it was a walk down a path, half a mile. So every morning he'd take his bucket and go down and get water. Bring it back to the cabin, and very happy, very simple, pleasant life. No great problems. He'd get away from that big city back in the east. But other people came to the area too, not too close to him, so it wasn't too crowded. So as he continued every day to walk down with his bucket down to the river, he met a few other people, and they'd stop and talk with him. And he didn't really want to talk to them in particular, but they're curious. Who are you? Where you come from? Oh, I'm from Vermont too. And but he was beginning to be earnest about life, and he didn't want to waste his time just blabbing socially. So he talked a little bit, then went on his way and got the water and brought it back, and very content, very happy. And he continued to ponder life, what it was all about, and why people are why they suffer so much, why they're so puzzled, and why he was so puzzled. So one day he went down to walked down the trail down toward the river to get water, and a man came up to him, and the man was holding his back. And he said, I noticed you're going down to get water. I hurt my back the other day, the man said. I wonder if you'd mind going down and getting water for me today, please. I live just not too far from you up there, if you wouldn't mind. Well, the man said, certainly I can understand how you might be pained by it. So he took his man's bucket. The man hobbled off back home, and he went down the river and got 2 buckets and brought one back to the man's house and back to his own house. Fine. A couple days later, walking down again, the man came along again. This time the man's leg was a little bit lame. I stumbled and hurt myself the other day. You mind getting water for me? Well, the man thought twice about it, but the man apparently is lame. I'll get water for him. So he did it again, got it back on. One day, there's a knock on his door. Same man, would you mind taking my bucket down, getting water for me? By the way, do you understand that water is a symbol of truth in all spiritual literature? That might help you. So this time the man gave 3 thoughts about it, but he finally did it. And he began to see his resentment into doing the other man's work. So he did a couple more times and resented it. A little bit later, knock on his door, and guess who was outside? 6 people. And guess who these 6 people were? 3 men and 3 women. They were a council. Now guess what this council was formed for? Well, they were formed for as follows, as they told the earnest man. We see that the area is growing here a little bit, and as you know, we must all cooperate as human beings together on this earth. We feel if we come together and form a little organization, we can all help each other getting water back from the river, for example. So here's the plan. One day of the week, you go down and takes all the buckets down and get water up for everyone else, and next day someone takes your bucket and the other down, so that you only have to go down the river every once in a while, get water on. Well, all right, fine. He said, fine, I'll do it. So he was first in line to take the water down, which he wondered about. But he took all the buckets down and went all around, spent half the morning bringing water to every one of the other person's home. Finally got home very tired, and carrying the other buckets, he'd spilled half of his anyway, so only had a half a bucket, which he didn't like too well. But he felt, not too bad after all. This was the end of his tour of duty. This was Saturday morning, and of course, his bucket would be filled with water, and I think you're ahead of me on the story. So he put his bucket out Friday night and said, tomorrow morning I will have a nice bucket full of pleasant river water on the doorstep when I looked out. So when he looked out, there was one thing there, a bucket, but no water. No explanation. No one had done their part to get water for him. So, but what worried him most and made him frankly angry, as earnest man he wasn't a perfect man, he was kind of angry about it. There was no explanation. The only thing was no water. And he was thirsty. So he went around to the head of the council. He went around and said, what happened? Where's my water? Well, he got a speech. And when he went away, he knew no more why he didn't get the water than before he heard the speech. So he went to a second member of the committee, same thing. They were marvelous speech makers, and they used pretty words and fancy, but he couldn't figure out what they were talking about. It sounded logical, but the fact remained he didn't get any water, and it never did come to him. So he began to get a little bit disillusioned with human nature, and he began to get a little bit tired. Listen to this. He began to get a little bit tired of the way he was handling things. Getting a little bit weary of being taken, because his mind was beginning to suspect that people aren't what they seem. That Council for International Cooperation, they sure didn't cooperate with him. They cooperated in getting him to do their work, but that's where it ended. So he decided to cut them out of his life. Get to the boiling point. No matter how much you cooperate with people, you get in trouble. And I can see that I was wrong in my thinking. I was trying to bargain with them. Look, I can get up in the morning and take my bucket down to that river, fill it up, bring it back. I've got the water, no problems, no complications, no waste of time, no blabbing, no running around asking why I didn't get your cooperation. Man, I've discovered a great secret of life. Live my own life, get my own water. So he thought that was the end of it. Far from it. Do you know that society won't leave you alone? You just try to get them to leave you alone and find out what happens. That's not the way society works. It's out to involve you to try to get you to solve their problems. Well, anyway, the man said no to everyone who came up and tried to make a deal with him to cooperate in getting the water up. He wouldn't help the man who limped a little bit. He refused to stop and talk with the people who wanted to blab about Vermont. He was polite and he nodded to them, but he went down and got his water and went home, and that was the end of it. He could sense their hostility and their resentment toward him that he wasn't cooperating with them, that he was antisocial, that he wasn't a good neighbor. He could sense that, but he said, no, I've got to do it, and I'm going to do it, and I did it, and it's going to stay like that. So then a peculiar thing happened. Now, this is society I'm talking about. This isn't just a story, and I hope you have brains enough to see it. So about a week later, there was a series of crimes in the prairie, on the prairie there. Some cattle were being rustled. Someone was stealing someone else's cattle. And he noticed that when he walked by certain people, different places, that they looked at him kind of funny and made little remarks to him. And he knew what was happening. He knew that because he had made an enemy of them by remaining independent, that they were accusing him, silently as yet, of stealing their cattle. And he also suspected something, because he wasn't totally stupid. He also suspected that one of the men who was silently as yet accusing him was probably the rustler himself, because he slipped a little bit. He made one or two remarks about the brands on those cattle that only the rustler could have known. But he had no evidence. There's nothing he can do about it. So the atmosphere grew thicker and thicker around him. That is, he could actually see that he was in physical danger from the cooperators, from the people of the council, from all those pretty ladies who went to church, and all those men with the uniforms who were important in the county. He began to see that he was actually in danger from them. Well, that's simple enough. I'll take up and go somewhere else. I'm not running away. What do I care where I live? I could live my own life anywhere I want. So he went farther west, found a nicer place to live, as much isolated as he could. And being an earnest man, he now sat in his cabin for long periods of time when he wasn't out getting his own water from the New River and baking his own bread. He became an amateur but very, very practical philosopher. And he began to put together all the pieces of the experiences they had had since he'd left the East and came out to the West. And after long, hard work, not reading books, he didn't have any books, but he began to read himself. He saw how he felt sorry for that man with the hurt back, and how he fell for something, how that man was one of the first to accuse him later on, and how remarkably his back recovered. He began to understand how gullible, how foolish he had been, and he also began to understand what this world was really like. And what it was like was composed of people who refused to take responsibility for their own lives, but whose energy, whose life itself, unknown to them, really, they don't know, forgive them, they know not what they do. All these people were like little machines who went around bumping into other people asking, what can I get? How can I get out of my responsibility? How can I take the easy way? How can I get someone else to do my work for me? In short, horribly, how can I remain on the very, very low level of life that I am presently living on? But they don't call it that, because society has become experts in using words and labels to disguise, to distort the facts of life, of human beings as they actually are. He saw this quite clearly. Now, what a nice little story, huh? How many of you, if one of you, turned your attention back on yourself and saw how one of the major purposes of your life is to get someone to get your water for you? And if he doesn't bring it fast enough, the only thing you know to do is to criticize. But your one refusal is to go down to the river, take your own bucket, and go all alone. Goodbye, brother. Goodbye, wife. Goodbye, friend. Goodbye, spiritual advisor, whatever that would be. Goodbye, government official. Goodbye, mama. Goodbye, papa. Goodbye to my own life as I've presently lived, as I am presently living it, as I've lived it in the past. You see, you don't know that these people that you're depending on to get your water for you are slipping poison into it. That's why you're sick. And it's the same thing as you consenting to them putting that poison in it, because you are turning your head away, looking at the pretty ballroom, looking at your dreams of the future, looking to someone else while they're slipping the poison pills into it. Whose fault is it if you're not paying attention to what they are doing? You don't want to see them. Do you know you're so dumb, you're so stupid. You listen to this. You are so stupid that you're afraid to bear the embarrassment of catching your friends slipping the poison pills into your water. You're afraid to bear the embarrassment of them looking up, and you're looking over there. You've caught them red-handed with those red pills right in their hand, dropping it in there. And you don't have the courage to catch them red-handed and bear their wrath, whatever it may be. And there are 1,000 reactions they could have, appealing to your pity, threatening, subtle threats. I order you, effective as of now, to let the world subtly, openly threaten you. Every human being you know or ever will know, I order you to let them threaten you all they want. And you just stand and take it. But you had better catch them putting those pills in that pail for your sake. There is guidance for doing this. There is right help for doing this. There is such a thing as wrong dependency. There is such a thing as right dependency, which is nothing more than dependency on the truth. God, truth, reality wants to know, and pay attention to this, please. God, truth, reality wants to know who you love most. Now you find out your answer to that. And if you have found that you fail, that you love your friends more than you love that water of truth, then you begin to correct that. And if you have the earnestness that this man in the story had, even a little bit to start, you can make the progress that he did. You can begin to see where you've made your mistake. You can begin to see how weak you really are, how you're afraid to challenge wrongness and invite rightness. Even to see how afraid you are, how timid you are. That's the beginning, and that's a beautiful thing. Then you'll drink from your own water. You will drink from your own water, and you will have 100% command of it, control of it. And no human being, no one, no organization, no society, no one will be able to poison it because they won't get near it. Besides, do you know, if you have pure water, they won't want to come around you because they're used to poison water. And they will call your pure water poison water and call their poison water pure water. What a marvelous experience. Let's do it. And it's time for a break.
The language in the New Testament about bearing each other's burdens is obviously to do with not becoming negative over the negativities of others. That seems to me all that it means. And also the language about the guru, so-called, or the teacher, bearing another's burden simply means that you're referring to someone who does not become negative when others become negative.
All right.
That would not be a process of thought, not because the person had decided, but merely because his state of being was such that he just didn't. Period.
All right, just to rephrase that, which is a good thought. Our own real inner growth is bearing another person's burden. We're not giving him quite so much sickness on Tuesday that we did on Monday. We don't add to his burden by being as sick on Tuesday as we were on Monday. Do you suppose, any of you here in this room, that you are causing burdens to other people? Well, let me tell you that hypnotized human beings, which you are, have no choice but to add to the burden of other hypnotized human beings. Then when you become wide awake, you will only give them something that is not of your burden at all. You don't have one anymore. So how can you burden anyone else? But they won't know that. All human hypnotized people are very, very greedy, very subtly greedy, grasping. We discussed that the other night. We meet someone, and our first thought is, what can I get? And it could be 1,000 things, couldn't it? Material things, psychological things, a little bit of flattery, just the total stranger. You're waiting for this market to open up, and a stranger comes up, and you might think, well, here's my chance to get a little distraction. Oh, I see you're from Minnesota. Well, I passed through there 10 years ago. Why don't you stand there and wait for the market to open up without distracting yourself in any way at all? Just watch what's going through your mind. If he talks to you, watch your reaction to what he says. All right. We're afraid to make an enemy out of someone who's already an enemy.
Yeah.
Right? Don't you know all your friends are your enemies? You don't have any friends. All you have is people who smile at the proper time, and you don't want to arouse them. Now look, I will guarantee you that if you look carefully at some of your friendships, you will see how you tiptoe through the tulips very carefully with them, not to arouse them, not to offend them, right? That means you know what they're really like inside. They could suddenly explode. You know already that they're your enemy. Why didn't you see it fully, consciously, thoroughly? And then I'll tell you what to do. After that, you take a little hand and you go up like that. And then you go wiggle like that. That's called the farewell wave.
I see what you be discussing, and I will try to stay away from the people. And yet I will get, after 3 or 4 days, lonely, and I'll go out for more of this.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So you go out, or you stay home. The only important thing is for you to see where you were carried. All you have to do is to see that you're not one person, not two persons, but about 20 people inside. The very knowledge that there are 20, 30, 50 people inside of you, that itself, that awareness of that begins to reduce the number. Then eventually, when you go out or when you stay home, a whole, W-H-O-L-E person does either, and there's no problem. You're not going out to meet anyone because you don't have to meet anyone. You're not staying home and feeling sorry for yourself because there's no one there for you to feel sorry for. You're a whole person, and a whole person can go anywhere and do anything and stay whole. Answer your question, Linda. Will you remember that, please? The one way to understand all this is to personally experience it. We are in words now, but they are very clear words, and they do explain things. Now you take it home and watch your conflict between two choices